Good evening, Papua New Guinea, and welcome to a brand new episode of Business PNG. Now, on this episode, we feature yet another edition of the Oxford Business Group Corner, OBG Corner, with Managing Editor of the PNG Report, Mr. Tjeerd Ritmeester, who speaks with stakeholders from the manufacturing sector, Ashlon Chue from the Pacific Industries, and CEO of the Manufacturers Council of PNG, Chey Scovell.
Tonight, we're going to take industry very literally. I invited, therefore, two guests. My first guest of tonight is Ashlon Chue. He will be speaking for PNG Industries. Ashlon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, TJ. It's a pleasure to be on the show with you.
Same around. Just to start off a little bit briefly, Ashlon, you, together with your brothers, you are now more and more becoming responsible for Pacific Industries, but beside that, you're of course also one of PNG's new generation, upcoming generation. How does it feel to be from such a young age to be already representing one of PNG's more iconic companies?
Yeah, look, it's a real. I guess you could say there's a lot of passion there with us, with the rich history of Pacific Industries, third generation being back now, being involved with the business. You know, we started back, really, my grandfather was working for a soda factory during World War II for the American, bottling for the American troops, and that's how we got started. So it's I guess a lifelong dream for us to come back and start to take over the business, and it's all starting to come into fruition now. It's for us, PNG's always been home, so we're very proud of our rich history. And yeah, it's home for us, so we're really happy to be back.
Perfect. Happy to hear that, and must make you proud. My second guest of today is Chey Scovell, CEO of PNG Manufacturers Council. Chey, I'm actually doing you a little bit short with just saying that, because when looking at what you are doing at the moment, it's a never-ending list. If I can just name a few, you are with PNG Power, National Road Authority, even food security here and there you are involved. Like I said, a never-ending list. Where do you find the time?
Well, they all tie in, thankfully. So all roads lead to Rome, as they say, and in terms of all of those representations in the different sectors, they're all about, you know, creating platforms for viable and successful businesses. So they're quite related with one another, and that makes it much easier to get everything done.
Ashlon, as a young entrepreneur, can you tell us a little bit how attractive PNG's industrial and manufacturing sectors are now in 2018?
Look, yeah, TJ, thanks. You obviously you know, covered quite a lot of the challenges that most businesses here face with operating in Papua New Guinea. In recent times, the toughest, I guess, issue for us is not being so much the infrastructure and the roads and a lot of the things that you spoke about, which are there. The main thing that's really affected our business is a legitimate company like us competing against, you know, unfair import practices. With a lot of, as we call them, fly-by-night companies that have come in. And, you know, I would go on a limb as far to say that if you went out and actually had a look in terms of soft drinks in particular, I think you would find it extremely difficult to find even one company that's actually paying the correct import duties, paying VAT, okay, not under-declaring the value of product coming in, and then obviously attributing to their company taxes. So really that's been the main hindrance for us in the last number of years. You know, the market changed dramatically. You had a huge influx of foreign companies, operators coming in to PNG, and I guess this is just the game that they started to play. And unfortunately, you know, in previous times, you know, we had a huge, you could say, lag in the terms of gaining compliance on these things, where these sorts of businesses just thrived. So that was a huge factor for us in previous times. However, you know, it's no secret that there has been a tariff reform, which you know, is a big part of moving forwards on compliance and allowing local industry, local businesses to flourish again.
Chey, the sentiment as Ashlon just described from his point of view, do you see that all over the board? Do you see that also with other local manufacturers?
In terms of compliance and fair trading, it's not a phenomenon that's only burdening manufacturers. If you have a look at a number of surveys that are conducted annually in Papua New Guinea, if you go back, say, 2-3 decades, you'll have seen you had things like infrastructure, law and order, you know, the utilities. They're all there featuring the whole time. You probably had about 12 or 13 that jostled with one another for the top 10. What was not ever really there, but certainly never in the top 5 or 6, was this fair trading environment or compliance, where now you have companies putting that literally in their top 1, 2, maybe 3 most concerning priorities that's directly impacting on their ability to conduct and operate their business, to continue to invest in their business. So that is a significant challenge that impacts on everybody. If we look more holistically, I guess, at the environment for manufacturers in Papua New Guinea, again, what's good for a manufacturer is generally what's good for a lot of other investors. You know, the same burdens that are being faced by potential MSMEs in Papua New Guinea is the high cost of doing business in Papua New Guinea. You know, the amount of money that people have to pay to rent an office, the amount of money that you have to pay in your utilities, the reliability of those utilities, the access to skilled labour. We have, you know, a tremendous, you know, untapped sort of, you know, labour workforce there, but actually finding productive people that are skilled is a big challenge. So for manufacturers, a number of those things that you touched on are all very, very significant things to face. And I guess the real question you sort of need to look at is, well, where are we right now and why are we here? And where do we want to be and how can we get there?
I'm Leanne Girari in Lorengau and you're watching Business PNG. Now, while the manufacturing sector isn't as prolific as the extractive industries, it is a pivotal sector. And in this segment, the panel discusses the importance of the sector in wealth creation as well as job creation.
Looking at what the government is currently planning in that field, what steps do you see that are being taken to improve that business environment?
Listen, I think it's quite timely. As we sit here in the studio today, a number of people from very, very different sectors, both from you know, different business sectors, civil society, government, are all making their way to Lae for the Planning Minister's you know, development forum, which will shape the medium-term development plan 3. I think what goes into that plan will be very, very important. In terms of manufacturing, we were able to feature in the second plan, we weren't noted in the first. I don't think there's ever been a shortage of politicians and bureaucrats, you know, in terms of public servants that were there to listen, but it's certainly not been until the last 7 or 8 years that we've had, you know, both at the leadership level and the bureaucratic level, this recognition on the importance to grow the economy. You know, when money was coming in, it was just about how can we allocate it, and we can hit it with an axe, we can hit it with a bush knife. Now there's not much money, we're trying to dissect it with a scalpel, but they realise now what we really need to do is have, you know, a country, right, and we should have it by rights, where there's not 6 or 7 billion kina raised through domestic revenues, it's 20 billion kina. And that's, you know, that's not an unreasonable sort of, you know, scenario for Papua New Guinea. And it's where we need to go, but we'll never ever get that if we don't grow businesses. And that's what I said before. We've got to say, well, why are we here where we are, and where do we want to go? I think you know, it's very easy to develop plans that cost lots and lots of money. What industry is really keen to see out of this medium-term development plan 3 is things that were similar to what was in the 100-day 25-point plan. You know, we know that there's a whole lot of other things that people might say would be wonderful to have, but we need to have a set of plans and priorities that can be achieved with the resources that we have at our disposal now. So everything needs to be for manufacturing and for Papua New Guinea, which links into agriculture. what can we do to increase our capacity for efficient production? And I think that if all of the leaders, it doesn't matter if you're sitting in education, it doesn't matter if you're sitting in, science and higher education, if you're sitting in the, you're the Minister for the Police, if you're the Minister for the Public Service, or you're the Treasurer or the Planning Minister, you need to be saying, how can we best increase our capacity for efficient production?
Ashlon, from your experience, to what extent, with all these changes going on, definitely in terms of diversification and self-sufficiency, to what extent do you see that the government at this moment is more and more understanding of what the industry needs?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question, TJ. Look, in recent times, this tariff reform has added some good changes for local manufacturing. And, obviously Chey spoke extensively about, a lot of the issues that we have in terms of infrastructure, power costs, all these things, right? High cost business environment here in Papua New Guinea. And then when you have that compounded with, the word that you used was competitive and even playing field. And I think, what the government really understood, well, in the changes in this current budget, was that, if you've got a competitive local industry, right, then, and you've got enough competition within that industry, then the real question is, what value does it add to have imports coming in? And that currently, in terms of the soft drink industry, you've got Coca-Cola, you've got Paradise now with the franchise for Pepsi, you've got ourselves, you've got American Cola, who are apparently opening up a plant in Lae, are currently commissioning a plant in Lae, and I hear that there's talks of one possibly also being in POM. You've got also a number of other small SMEs, to name a few, that have started up, different types of beverage lines, which Chey's also aware of. So you've got a competitive environment there. Really, when you look at what the benefits are versus the negatives, the benefits totally outweigh the negatives in terms of local manufacturing. And I think, without getting political, I think, in terms of some of the changes that were made in this budget, you have to applaud the government in terms of they're now looking at supporting local manufacturing. And that what that essentially means is that they're supporting local jobs, realistically, because, I'm a person that can speak firsthand when I say to you that I've been out there into every single yard in Port Moresby. I know every importer of soft drink. And, what amazed me was this. You look at a guy, okay, that's bringing in 1,000 containers of imported soft drink a year. How much local employment do you think that guy has?
10, maybe.
You just hit the number right on the head. So a number of the yards that I went into, you can count their local employment on both hands, right? Versus if you look at our plant here in terms of Port Moresby, a small plant that does just juice, water and cordial, right? On this specific plant here in Port Moresby, we have 400, 500 local employees. And then obviously when you look at, it's not just about our local employees, you look at the spin-off effect, as Chey also touched on. Everything that we can get locally, we do. Obviously, he spoke about can manufacturing, which I think we might discuss a little bit further down the track. But anything that we can source locally, whether it's packaging, transportation, services, everything is done locally. So it creates a lot of extra jobs outside of our business. But also one of the other great things to note about manufacturing is that because of the nature of the business, you actually do need a lot of people on site. So, for example, in our plant here in Moresby, we house 200 nationals, because we require, our engineers, our electricians, all our supervisors to be on site in case something goes wrong, and they're called in. Really, I think that this government, the thing that has changed is that they've really understood, right, what we need to move forward. And the thing for me is that at the moment, given our current economic cycle, the number one priority for PNG should be local employment.
I'm Leanne Gerari in Port Moresby, and you're watching Business PNG.
If you live in Australia, like the Netherlands, like myself, at some point you can expect that those products come in and they are cheaper because they come from countries where labor and all those kinds of things are cheaper. But that's not the case in PNG, of course. PNG is a very different market. It's still emerging. And for you as a local producer, Ashlon, that must have been very frustrating to see, of course, with all those importers. I mean, I know you're very
frustrating.
I can see Chey laughing there a bit because, yeah, I'll try and answer this as diplomatically as possible. Yeah, look, Chey, again, you know, all the points that Chey touched on, you know, very knowledgeable in terms of all the issues that we have as being representative of the council. And it was extremely frustrating. And the reason why it was frustrating was this, again, you know, if this was about, for me, if this was just purely about profits, I would have done what a number of other manufacturers did, was take our volume offshore and import back in, okay? Because I would have made a lot more money doing that, right? The thing is that I'm very passionate about and very proud, you know, to be a third generation Papua New Guinean, and you know, to come back here and run our family business. It's, you know, it's been operational since, you know, the war, and so, you know, when you see these foreign businesses coming in, and as Chey said, you know, the way that the previous tariffs were structured were basically allowing these guys to just run wild, okay? You know, they were, you know, all sorts of things. There was a number of dumping practices, but on top of that, they were totally devaluing the worth of cartons, and because it was done on an ad valorem basis, they weren't paying duties, they weren't paying taxes, and then on top of that, when you add in the transfer pricing and all these things, they're not paying company tax either. So it makes it very hard, even as efficient as we are, it makes it very hard when you're playing on top of the table and these guys are playing beneath it. You know, that's essentially what was happening. So it was extremely frustrating. And then on top of that, when you go into these guys' yards, you see them driving around in Range Rovers and their expansion, okay? And you see that they're not supporting local employment. They're adding nothing to our economy. Yeah, look, you know, as someone that's very patriotic about our country, as Chey is, it really leaves a bitter taste in your mouth to be diplomatic.
I can understand, and I mean, in the end, it's not about being protectionist. I mean, PNG is known for being quite a liberal country in that sense, but it's about it's about creating a fair playing field, a fair level playing field for the local industry.
It's important to recognise that this is a temporary measure. This is not, you know, it's not inscribed in stone.
No.
You know, this is about saying, what can we do now to create jobs?
Yeah.
And if we take a population base of 7.5 million, 8.2 million, wherever you want to rest your hat, and say that only half of them are able to provide any sort of productive means into a contribution to society, we have an unemployment rate in Papua New Guinea of about 90, we've got 8% employment, so 92% unemployment.
Yeah,
if you looked at it like that. Now, where could we go anywhere in the world and talk about having a 92% rate of formal, you know, of unemployment in the formal sector, and everybody not stop? You know, you look at what's happening in some of these European countries where they talk about 25 or 30% unemployment, and all of these drastic measures that are acceptable and necessary to take. But when it comes to our own country, where we need to generate, and we need formal employment. So we do take that with a grain of salt. So 8% formally employed, 92 not there. That doesn't mean that 92% of our people are out there, you know, going hungry, no means to participate in the economy. We've got this huge informal sector. but those people are not able to make a contribution through the, through the Waigani public account, through consolidated revenue, so that our governments, our elected leaders can reinvest those contributions into improving the platforms on which we live and on which we do business. So that's why we've got to have these temporary measures that are monitored and are controlled. And as we got all of those levers, but right now this was the most appropriate lever to be pulled. Yeah. And it has got the changes and all of those things that people, it's true. There was a couple of shops that increased the prices dramatically, but do you know what? They're the same shops that have been importing many goods, undervaluing, misdeclaring, and they did it just to seek a lot of profit. And we've encouraged the authorities to, to really make sure that those businesses that only sought to profiteer and gouge our consumers be put through very fine-toothed combs for compliance, down the future and for a long time, because that was just, that was nastiness. It wasn't needed. But there's been no increases across the board in all of those sectors.
And that's all we had for this episode of Business PNG. For more information, or if you'd simply like to view this episode again, visit EMTV online at the URL at the bottom of your screen. Or to simply join the conversation, like our page on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at the Twitter handle at Business PNG. Until next week, have a pleasant evening. I'm Leanne Jarari, and this was Business PNG.